Hi, hello. My name is George Wright. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the head of social media here at myGwork. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us this afternoon for our first panel of 2022. We're kicking it off with the importance of mentoring, and we've got a fantastic panel assembled here this afternoon to discuss and answer some of your questions around mentoring. If you find this session particularly interesting, we do have running immediately after this an hour-long workshop on becoming a myGwork mentor, the link for which I will make sure is in the chat at the end of this session. I will, however, now introduce our panel before we get started. We are joined this afternoon by Elliot O'Glasser. Would you like to introduce yourself, Elliot?
Sure, thanks, George. I'm Elliot O'Glasser. I'm the HR director for Leica Biosystems Enabling Functions. So I support all of our corporate functions across the globe. I've been with Danaher for about 4.5 years, and this is my third role with the organization.
Excellent, thank you very much. We're also joined by Samantha. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, George. My name is Samantha. My pronouns are she, her. I work as sales development representative with Morningstar. I've been with Morningstar for 6 months. It's an absolute pleasure to join you all today. And George, kudos for pronunciation of my last name. No, not easy.
Thank you very much. You flatter me unnecessarily. We are also joined by the wonderful Robin Panrucker. Robin, please introduce.
Hi, thanks, George. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Well, not see you all, but nice to be here today. I'm Robin. I work as head of talent development at Taylor Wessing, a law firm based in the city. I've been with the firm almost 8 years, I think it is now, mainly looking after all of our different development programs rolled out across the UK and beyond. So delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation, George.
No worries. Thank you very much. We're also joined by Nasar. Nas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. My name is Nasar Zabar. I'm one of the learning and development managers at Reed Smith. I joined the firm just over a year ago, and yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
Fantastic. We're also joined by Wesley Trust. Wesley, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm based in London, UK, and I'm a technical delivery lead at Capgemini. I've been at Capgemini about 8 months now, and I was part of the LGBT plus reverse mentoring program there. And it's looking forward to the panel today.
Thank you so much, Wesley. And finally, last but not least, our very capable moderator, Mr. Tom Gates. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, George. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tom. My pronouns are he, him. I am an associate at law firm Reed Smith, so I'm a colleague of Nasar's. I'm based in London. Reed Smith are also the sponsor of today's event. In my day job, I'm an entertainment and media lawyer, and as George said, I will be moderating today's event.
Excellent. Thank you to all of our panels. And yes, thank you to Reed Smith, who is sponsoring this event. You can find out more about Reed Smith's opportunities, jobs and events coming up over on their myGwork profile, and I'll get the link to you all soon. But less of me and more of our fantastic panel. Tom, please, I'll leave it in your very capable hands.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, George. So as George said, we've got a really fantastic group of panelists here today joining us, but we've only got the hour. So I'll get into it and kick off today's discussion on the importance of mentoring. Do feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A box whenever you like throughout the session, and we will answer them if we've got time. I'm just going to start off with a bit of an easy one, but I'm hoping we can learn a lot from the discussion, from the panelists' experience. So my first question to the panel, and feel free anyone just to kick us off, is that in the last few years, and certainly throughout the pandemic, we've seen a real increase in companies investing more in the well-being and development of their staff. I don't think there's anyone that could argue with that. But where do we see mentoring programs specifically fitting in with and contributing to an organization's well-being and development strategy? So would anybody like to kick us off on that first question?
I can kick off if that's okay.
Of course.
Fabulous, thank you. So this is a brilliant question. I think it's hugely important nowadays, isn't it? Mentoring. I think when you look at it in two parts, well-being and development, yes, they overlap fairly easily. But I think by learning from each other, that's the crux of mentoring, isn't it? By learning from each other here, we can then start talking more openly about any well-being issues. You can find out from others what they're doing or have done to navigate these choppy waters that we've been in. And I guess starting that conversation where there may not have been that to begin with. So it's really helping people find their voices, I guess. I think also that helps people know that they're not alone in this. That's key there. And looking at different people, different routes, different opportunities that they may have never considered ever before. I think the other thing with that is that there's a lot of reciprocal mentoring programs out there now, which actually have more specific routes and people that you can align yourselves to, which is so important. Never existed when I was younger, so I'm thoroughly delighted they exist nowadays. And I think it's good that they exist. And the well-being stuff doesn't just you just don't get swallowed up by that generic mentoring stuff. Also, I guess on that front, as you know, if you have a more senior person as your mentor, and there are challenges and stuff that is going on with well-being and other things like that, they can raise it. They then have a voice to raise it and create something bigger within the firm. I'll just leave that bit there, and I'll flip into the development quickly, so I give other people a chance to speak. I'm head of talent development, so I can't not talk about this. I think it's so important, and Elliot's, manager over there as well, so it's so important for this as well. We learn from doing and seeing and observing. That's how we learn as adults. So there's what better way to learn than from those that have been in your shoes or trodden that path before you. You get to a result quicker, absolutely. I think that's always good if you want an answer to something, and your development can move on much more quickly if you have those people. I do have a hesitation with this when it's more formal, and we'll talk about this a bit later, I'm sure. You don't always want to just have a cookie cutter approach to how we learn, how we develop. So there's a real, that's my only caveat to this, is that that's lovely up to a point, but sometimes you have to flip into that, kind of more coaching, mentoring relationship to help that. But I think it's just finding those avenues for both, and just kind of seeing how that will help you, but raising that voice, having that conversation, talking to others, and just learning from each other. That's what it comes down to, really. I'll be quiet now. Let someone else talk. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Robin.
Happy to jump in, Robin. I appreciate your comments. I think the merits of a mentor relationship are, you can't really debate that. The value is great. I think where we've seen some struggle in the past couple of years, as we moved into a more distributed workforce and aren't in the office, having those informal connections with peers or people who are above us in the organization, the value of a formal mentoring program kind of increases, because you don't have those connections that happen by chance, and you're not, having face-to-face conversations with people in your organization organically. I have historically not been a huge fan of mentoring programs because it feels sort of like an arranged marriage where you get into the room with your mentor and you're not really sure kind of what you should be talking about. It feels a little bit forced or contrived. But I think as we've moved into this remote working or hybrid working model, those formal connections really become more important, because we don't have that in-person office culture. I think, being intentional with a mentoring program is so critical. When I'm working with the clients that I support at LBS and at Danaher, a mentoring program is often sort of thrown as the first countermeasure against any engagement, development, or retention issue. But it's not always the best approach. It's sort of an easy sort of thing to throw out, but if your mentoring program doesn't have a clear framework of kind of what you're trying to go after, what the goals of the program are, it can get a bit lost and hard to sort of measure the success of the program. As I think about Danaher is a 70,000 employee global science and technology innovator, and we have lots of different swells of associate population, and being specific about what each of our mentoring programs is going after and trying to achieve is where I think we've seen the most success.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Elliot, that you made actually about not being a fan of this sort of cookie cutter contrived approach where one size fits all for a mentorship program, and sort of almost throwing mentorship at a problem to try and address it in the first instance. But that sort of provokes an additional question. How do we provide a large scale mentoring program, I mean, Elliot, great example with you with so many employees. How do we provide a mentoring program to a large number of people, but at the same time, tailor that mentoring program to an individual, to what their own objectives are? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? It's a really tricky one, and I'm not sure if there is.
Tom, I'll have a stab. Well, I think to kind of follow on from Elliot's point about having a clear direction, purpose, intention around the mentoring program, a number of mentoring programs are now being offered for various business inclusion groups within organizations. And, you know, whether those are small in community numbers or on a larger scale, having that sense of common purpose around why this mentoring program is being developed in the first place definitely creates that feeling of connection and collectivism. You know, though, yes, you'll have an individual mentor with their individual mentee, the sentiment is still there, that's being shared. My feeling as a mentee, if I'm part of the, say, for example, the multicultural network, I know that I've got fellow multicultural employees experiencing the same things as me as an employee, i.e. there aren't enough people who look like me here. The barriers to having conversations with very, very high profile leaders in the firm is exactly the same. So knowing that there's that familiarity and similar experiences being felt and seen, I think that definitely aids the launch of mentoring programs on a larger scale and makes it that much more consistent, focused, and still targeted.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Nas. I think that makes total sense. So I think really the takeaway from that is that we need to have some sort of shared experience among those that we sort of embark on the mentorship program with. And that sort of follows on. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Samantha.
No, it's okay, Tom. Just to add on to those two comments, that whilst I agree, it's also important personally to not necessarily go down the formal mentoring program route. If you're a young person who's just joined a company, if you're a young person who's about to graduate, like one of my mentees is, if you've just entered the workforce, I think it's really important. Maybe you don't necessarily have a problem, but it's just about getting used to speaking to those people who are, 5 years ahead of you, and getting used to interacting with them at that level, because maybe you haven't before. And if there isn't a formal mentoring program in your organization, or whatever you're orbiting at school or out of school, just joined a workplace, do not hesitate to reach out to people on LinkedIn or however you meet them. I have a sales background, so I'm very insistent that, if one door isn't opening right now, you keep knocking, gently, politely, of course, but, someone out there will have time and or willingness and enthusiasm to interact with you and perhaps help you on your journey. And I think that's also a really, really valuable way to look at mentoring. Doesn't necessarily need to be formal. Doesn't necessarily need to be when you have a problem or an issue. It can just be actually something that you do from the very get-go, because it's good practice and it's a healthy thing to do for yourself as a young professional.
Can I just add to that as well? I've seen a few different sort of informal and formal mentoring programs, and I see a bit of a hybrid approach at times, where there's more like a mentoring framework where it's not necessarily as rigid, and there's topics of career development and different things that people can go down, but rather than having like a fixed period where you need to have X amount of meetings and give X amount of time, have more that sort of engagement with that person about what they want to get out of it, what questions and how much time each of you want to put into it as well. And I see that as being a more comfortable approach for a lot of people, because a barrier can be, how much time is this going to take up, and do the people sort of fear coming forward because of how much effort that might be involved for them and things like that, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I think that you make a really good point, and Samantha, also about the different types of mentoring and the approaches that we can take, because obviously, regardless of the purpose of that mentoring program, there are loads of different ways that we can deploy it. We can take a more formal, structured approach, or we can go for a more informal approach that might just happen organically. As Samantha says, it could just be something like sending a message on LinkedIn, and it can grow this fantastic mentoring relationship. But specifically on those two types, informal versus formal, do we think one is better than the other? Does another have a particular advantage over the other? Are there certain strengths compared to weaknesses?
I think of course, there's pros and cons to both methods. We know that. I think that the formal approach certainly helps those who are less confident to network and reach out to others in an organization. So that formal approach, where the structure, the processes, administration definitely assist in those instances. But like with Samantha, I'm a big fan of the informal approach. But again, I think it's driven by behavior and personality. Myself, I can join a brand new organization, pick up the phone book and reach out to people, but that's me and through my experiences. But formal mentoring will definitely help those less confident or unsure about who to reach out to.
I agree with Nasser on that point. Sorry, Elliot, you just had to jump in. Yeah, a huge advantage of the formal route in an organization or within an organization is that they also match you. So if you haven't a clue who might be able to assist me with XYZ particular problem, or who's got a similar-ish personality as me or similar-ish background or completely different background, but actually that will help me to pivot into something else. Yeah, like Nasser said, there's all of that back work that's been done for you. So when you sit down in front of that person, you're more likely to actually be ready to jump straight into the valuable stuff that's going to help you get on your way.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of both those 2 points. I think the formal route is great if you're trying to gain access to someone senior in your organization that you might not feel comfortable reaching out to cold. You have the sort of framework of the program and the support of whoever's facilitating that to make that connection. But I want to go back to something Samantha mentioned earlier. I think the act or the practice of getting support and leveraging a mentor is an ongoing thing. You're gonna leverage a mentor throughout your career, or a series, network of mentors throughout your career. It's not, I think to look at a mentor relationship as just something that's for early career as you build your network is maybe not how I would advise people to leverage mentors. I have mentors that people that I reported to or interviewed with years ago that I still consider within my network and part of my sort of board of directors that I go to for career advice and for advisement on a variety of topics. I mean, it's not sort of like this sort of stagnant thing, this sort of time-bound thing that a formal mentor program can sometimes dictate. That the active sort of learning how to leverage mentors throughout your career is a really valuable skill. And so if you need a formal mentoring program to help you make those first connections that also develop that sort of what am I trying to get out of this relationship? What am I leveraging this mentor for? And having that intentionality that I mentioned earlier. If you need that structure at the onset, great. But as you develop into your career, I think as you advance and grow within an organization, you start making those more informal mentor connections more and more that you'll continue to leverage throughout your career.
I think if I could just come in, I think, completely on point with that. I think the other thing with a formal program is if you're paired up in inverted commas with someone, it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't working for me. You can get someone else to have that conversation for you to say, can you kind of stop this, please? Because this isn't working quite right. Whereas if it was you'd gone out and found that for yourself, it's a bit more tricky, especially if you're more junior. That's a hard conversation to have, to say to someone, oh, sorry, but no. And you can kind of still keep them on side. Absolutely. I think, like you were saying, Elliot and Samantha, everyone has a role for something, and you have to just define what those mentors are for. I think that's where a formal route does help. And I think also you have that support, like we've said, others have said, you can go to someone and say, how do I do this? What do I do? What is it for? What are the topics I could choose? Help me. Whereas, you're absolutely right, Elliot. As you move through your career, you can have those more informal, you find them already. I think a lot of them, I was just reflecting just then on the mentoring relationships I have and had. They're all informal now, so I never have let's sit down in a room for half an hour, 45 minutes. They're always on the go to the tea point, to wherever it might be. And I think that's how it naturally evolves. And I think that's as soon as you realize you don't need a formal arranged by everybody all the time, I think that's quite a nice place to be. And then just use those. I think that's the key, isn't it? Using the right people for the right things that you need them for. Career development, I think that's what you were saying, wasn't it, Samantha? It's mainly the new in the business. What is it I need? Career development, help me network, who do I go to, etc., etc. So I think there's lots of different things, and just be prepared, isn't it, for any conversation you want to have with different people.
I'd love to add one more benefit of a formal mentoring program is that more than likely the individuals volunteering to be mentors tend to get really, really good training and development and support and guidance through a formal program, meaning that from a mentee experience, you're talking to someone that's been trained, that's been educated, that is aware of the do's and don'ts, and sometimes maybe just through an informal mentoring relationship conversation, things might be said that shouldn't be said, for example. Whereas fully trained mentors through a formal program, you're gonna be confident as a mentee.
That's great. Thanks very much for all the input, everyone. So I think we can agree there are various different pros and cons of both types of mentoring program. I think for the more formal approach to mentoring, we've got things like the structure and the organization that someone who's new to a company, for example, would benefit from. But at the same time, more of an informal approach is great because it can allow you to develop the program that you're on sort of to match with your own objectives. One thing that I want to just go back to, because I know this will be quite relevant to some of today's panelists, just given the roles that they work in, is that talent development and inclusion in the workplace. How can we really take advantage of mentoring as a concept, mentoring programs, to help really embed and develop inclusion and talent retention specifically in the workplace?
Personally, I think mentoring does have a role to play in helping retain talent and also with inclusion and diversity. I often have very conflicted feelings about the saying, you can't be one if you don't see one. I don't think that's true for everybody. But I think it does really, really help, to know that people like you, whatever you identify as, can forge a path for themselves in this organization. And if there aren't, then that would be a cause for concern for me. I would think, especially for a well-established organization, if there's not a single woman, BAME, POC person, at high level, that does ring some alarms for me. So I think it does have a really valuable role to play in that sense. And having those conversations and connecting with people in the organization on those topics is also really understated, I think, and undervalued.
So just speaking from the experience that I had leading our LGBTQ associate resource group or employee resource group at Danaher, we started that group about 3 years ago, and I led it for 2. And one of the things that we heard kind of over and over again when we surveyed our LGBTQ associate population was that they felt that we were doing a lot of great programming for the LGBTQ associate. We were doing a lot of great work kind of informing senior level leaders within the organization about inclusion topics, but that the point of impact between them and managers lower in the organization wasn't being felt. That level of inclusion wasn't being felt lower in the org. And so we developed a reverse mentoring program. I know, Wesley, you mentioned that you were a participant at Capgemini. So we developed a roughly 3 or 4 month cohort-based reverse mentoring program where we match sort of junior LGBTQ associates as the mentor with senior level people leaders as the mentee for a structured, very programmatic reverse mentoring program where the goal is to make those connections between LGBTQ associates and people leaders, talk about LGBTQ relevant sort of inclusion topics, make sure that there's kind of open dialogue about issues that LGBTQ workers face. And one of the sort of subsequent pros of that program is that you get the LGBTQ junior associate gets a really great connection with a senior leader. But in terms of advancing our commitment to making Danaher the most inclusive environment, the people leader gets a really great connection with someone who they might not have interacted with, who can help kind of guide them along their learning journey relative to LGBTQ issues.
I think just from our point of view, what I find interesting all the time is not everyone feels that they're allowed to be mentored or have that opportunity. And I think to be truly inclusive, absolutely, it's when you say to someone, that's an option. You can have that. You can have a mentor. You can do that, or you can be a mentor to someone else. And often people say, I only thought that was for more senior people or people on the route to progression or something. So I think what I've learned and what we definitely do in Taylor Westing is that every single performance review, check-in, whatever, we bring that as an option of development, and that in itself, just by opening up to people that hadn't even considered it. Sadly, we're not big enough to have, as you've just described, Elliot, some really key LGBT focused reverse mentoring. We have done that, but not in such a great program. But we do have that as an option if people wanted it. So, for example, all our different networks have committees. We say on all of them, if you want someone who is like you to be your mentor, let us know it, and all that stuff. But yeah, it's just making people aware that mentoring is for them if they want it, and it's that moment of realization. Oh, I can, even though I've only been here 2 minutes. It's actually quite nice when they take that up as well. So that's how I approach that subject.
And just to add, further around developing inclusion, mentoring programs are a real visible, tangible way of demonstrating allyship to the various inclusion groups within an organization. It's properly putting money where your mouth is, so to speak, so that you're speaking to someone that has a genuine vested interest in you, no matter who you are, how you identify. It's like that person is open arms and is inviting you to pry into their world as their mentee. So for me, 100%, it properly promotes and demonstrates allyship.
Thank you very much,
But it's
everyone.
of course important to say that it's not, a magic wand. If there's some really deep underlying issue in any organization, that's not going to solve it. But it does help to have those conversations and to open those doors. Which might speak a little bit to some of Sergio's questions about anchoring mentoring programs into the internal corporation policies of organizations. Something I found in past experience that was really useful, and I think it's something that we do at Morningstar, is having a member of the executive sponsoring that ERG, the employee resource group. I think that's really valuable because then you've got somebody that's part of the executive at the highest level of the organization that's also personally invested into the success of that employee resource group. And that does make a difference in terms of establishing it as a serious group, not just one that, puts on nice social events, but that, there's a bit more substance to it in terms of tangible things that you can get out of being a member of that group, be it allyship or, career professional development and feeling included.
I think that's a really good point, actually, Samantha, on the sort of the substance and what really makes a successful mentorship program actually happen. And yeah, just to touch on Sergio's point, it's great, we can have, especially in these mentoring programs, social events, that kind of thing, that are the fun side of things. But how do we actually anchor these mentoring programs into sort of corporate policies, and how do we sort of disseminate them from the top down. Has anybody got any experience with sort of how they've done that successfully?
It's not as prescriptive as that, but when we were developing the LGBTQ reverse mentoring program, we were doing that at the same time that Danaher was really evolving its DNI strategy. And this was about 2 years ago. We, as an organization, set the expectation that each people leader have a DNI-focused development objective. At Danaher, our sort of annual cycle, we have performance objectives and development objectives. Not to get into the nitty-gritty, performance is what you're doing. Development is how you're developing yourself and what you're doing in terms of soft skill perspective. And so it was the expectation across the entire organization that each people leader have a development objective that was focused on DNI. So as we think about the kind of loop in with the reverse mentoring program, there were lots of people in the organization that maybe people leaders that didn't know how they were going to craft the development objective around DNI, didn't really have the structure of like, okay, I want to focus on this. I want to develop myself as a leader to be more inclusive, but what are the tangible steps I take to go out and do that? And the reverse mentoring program was just kind of one way that some people leaders were able to put a tangible action against what they're going to do to help advance themselves along that inclusion journey. It wasn't kind of one for one, like you have to do this, you have to do that. But we did take into account that development cycle that we have for everyone in the organization when we designed the reverse mentoring program. I think not reinventing the wheel every time, kind of leading on whatever structure is in place is really important, because a lot of large organizations already have these sort of frameworks around development, that to the extent you can play on those and not create something net new, that you're just sort of enhancing what might already be there, is really important.
Could you say that again?
Sorry.
My apologies.
My Siri is wanting to interject. Yeah, I think just playing up on what already exists is really important.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Some really good points there. And I think it's important to remember, and just your point on reverse mentoring kind of brought this up for me, that obviously in a mentoring relationship, there's always going to be two people. There's going to be the mentor and the mentee, and each are looking to get something out of that relationship. Different things, but they both have objectives. So my question to the panel really is, how can mentors and mentees work together to sort of help each other in their own reciprocal personal and professional development?
That's one question that George and I discussed ahead of the panel, actually, which is a very enjoyable one for me. I'm a very person-led kind of approach type of person. So I think I learn as much from my mentees as, as I teach them or guide them or coach them into whatever situations and issues arise in their lives. So I think just being honest and also not fixating necessarily on like a power balance. I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. It's a two-way street. You talk to one another. This individual is a human being. They've got their own wisdom and their own experiences and knowledge and experiences that they bring to the conversation. So yeah, very much treating it like a partnership and an exchange. This person is unbiased, impartial. They're just here because they want you to be happy, to be successful. And so that's very much kind of the approach that I take to it. And when I don't know, one of my mentees, who I think happens to be on the call, her field is completely different to mine. So when I don't know, I'm very happy to make connections for her with other people within my network who I think actually they might have more, tangible, practical experience. And similarly, as I say, both of my mentees teach me a lot in the questions that they ask, the experiences that they have that, make me reflect on my own life. And also just, exchanging is always so valuable. Sometimes it's hard to put a definitive finger on what it is that I'm getting out of it, but just expanding your own understanding of human relations is, I think, worthwhile in and of itself.
And if I can talk a little bit about the reverse mentoring, I was a reverse mentor there, and in like our first session where I was paired up with a senior leader at Capgemini, we sort of tried to set out what the goals were that each of us wanted to try and achieve. And I literally just started at Capgemini, so one of my big goals was trying to introduce myself, expand my network, and figure out Capgemini. And like the goal of my mentee at the time was to kind of broaden her sort of horizon and experience on LGBT issues to help, you know, her in a future career as well. So we both had very sort of career-based goals in some way, you could say, that were related to the LGBT plus. And I think one of the interesting things as we went over the sort of the sessions that she sort of said to me was how much sort of emotional weight the LGBT plus people can carry in the workplace. And we came up with a few different situations, like, you know, if I start a new project team, am I more cautious at the beginning about, say, mentioning LGBT stuff because you don't necessarily know, you know, how people are going to react. And if there's, you know, Capgemini is a very global company, you know, do I take into considerations of any customers that may be operating in countries that, you know, where being gay is illegal or things like that? So there's lots of interesting sort of perspectives that may not have come across before that I was able to sort of convey. And there's lots of different things that, you know, she necessarily didn't think of before, which I thought was a really good sort of experience to share. And then it also, as we sort of went through different topics, I connected with my mum. Like we're in touch and everything, but what I mean is that we sort of went over some of the previous stuff because it brought everything back up. But now it's many years later and I've got a very different perspective now on things. And I got a lot out of it from that perspective that I didn't actually think I would when I started the reverse mentoring as well.
That's really interesting to hear, Wesley. So obviously it means that the benefits really can be a lot wider than purely workplace focused, and they can touch all sort of aspects of your life. And I just wanted to sort of ask the panel, obviously there's benefits to both the mentor and the mentee. Both parties have something to gain from the relationship. But in terms of the wider business operating that mentorship program, what kind of benefits can they expect to experience as a result of running a successful mentorship program?
For sure, it's going to help with the attraction strategy for an organization. You know, if at Reed Smith we can talk openly and positively and celebrate the various mentoring programs, formal or informal, what we offer here, at interview stage or even well before that on our social media pages, it definitely makes our law firm a consideration, whether you're a fee earner or not, to join our business. So that's a huge benefit.
Go on, Elliot.
Okay. Thanks, Robin. I think this goes back to my previous comments around kind of being clear on what problem it is you're trying to solve, what the purpose of your mentor program is. So I think you consider it successful if it's positively impacting the problem that you are trying to solve. So if it's a countermeasure against increased attrition within a certain swath of your associate base, and you can see a downtick there, great. If it's relative to progression of a certain level of associate to the next level, that's great. You can tie that back to the countermeasure of mentoring. If it's increased engagement and you can measure that from survey results, great. But I think the saying success is sort of one size fits all kind of is counterintuitive to the comments, or is in line with the comments around you can't have a one size fits all mentor program. It has to be tailored to the specific issue that you're trying to address. But being clear on what's sort of the metric or the trend that you're spotting, that you're trying to mitigate with this mentoring program, and being really deliberate about tracking to make sure that you see progress in that metric in a positive way, is where you can kind of call it successful. Obviously, there's intangibles there, so it's not just metric driven, but I think that's the best way for an organization to measure the success of the program.
I'll just add, I think also it helps if you look at the firm organization as a whole. It helps people connect, doesn't it? It helps people come together to meet each other. I think we all want to work in a place that you feel a sense of belonging, don't you? So if you've got that and you can sell that and you can engage with that, I think that's super important. And if that's all it does, and a bit of development on the side, I think that's really, really good. So for me, I think that's I mean, it's not a thing you can argue, can you, at board level? But I do think that's not a good place to start. Of how do I feel? Why should I go there? Oh, we've got these. And then to your point, Elliot, where do we go? I can go there. And, and to yours, Naz, we can sell that as a kind of engagement attraction piece, because that's what I guess now, especially more so nowadays, after the whole last couple of years, people are looking for more than just a place to work and whatever else. It's other things that fall into this. And this is where I think mentoring and shared experiences and learning from others can really, really help with that kind of feeling of belonging. That's my favorite word today, so I'm using it quite a lot. Apologies.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Robin. And that kind of brings me on to my next question, which I think we've kind of answered in part, is that, how do we actually measure the success of a mentorship program? And Elliot mentioned there we need to be clear of the metrics that we're going to identify and measure throughout, and they need to be linked somehow to the issue or the reason that we launched the mentoring program in the first place. I think one of the sort of key factors behind the success of a mentorship program is the willingness of individuals to take part. And I just wanted to gauge from the panel, apart from a willingness on this part of the mentor to take part, what other qualities can we look for in someone leading a good mentorship role?
I'd like to take a stab at this. I think being a good listener is really important. And also playing to your strengths as a mentor. So we discussed how in the formal mentorship route, they'll try to pair you perhaps according to personality, or perhaps according to issues with a person that they think you'll be best suited to help. So yeah, having a level of self-awareness and honesty is important, enthusiasm, willingness, and also being able to tap into your own network if actually, maybe this person wants something that's beyond you. So being able to open doors, I know it's very cliche, we hear this a lot nowadays, but yeah, someone who'll speak your name into rooms full of opportunities, and even when you're not around, is also something that I'd say is a good quality.
Great, thank you, Samantha. Anyone else got any input there?
I'd say someone that is genuinely willing to share, genuinely willing to give, genuinely willing to, stick their neck out a little bit for someone, because those who've been fortunate enough to have a mentor, those mentors tend to be the mentee's cheerleader along either the mentoring relationship or maybe beyond the mentoring relationship. So that, it's genuinely, of course, the mentor will benefit in many, many ways, either through reverse mentoring, the training they receive, and the recognition they may get internally. But it's that humble recognition that I've got so much blooming experiences over the years that I've been doing what I've been doing. It's time to give back. And that's for me a fundamental kind of box that needs to be ticked if you're considering being a mentor.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And just on that, and sort of that willingness to get involved, leading to the success of a mentorship program. Obviously, metrics, and definitely the lawyer in me is very attracted to the facts and figures that suggest a program is going very well. I just wondered if there are any other sort of softer indicators of the success of a mentorship program, other ways that indicate that it's going well and improving the staff experience.
I mean, I think testimonials are a great sort of softer measure of that. One of the things, because we run our reverse mentoring program on a cohort basis a couple times a year, one of the things that I look at as kind of a measure of success is how many of the next cohort are coming to us through referral versus through outreach from the associate resource group steering committee. If we're getting referrals to the program, from people who are past participants, I think that's a great indicator of the success of the program, because it's not, that's organic word of mouth. People are excited about what we're doing and see value in it. And that's a really strong indicator of success to me.
I'd say also for the case of Morningstar, I think the Women's Initiative mentoring program was 3 months, and some of the feedback was, they wanted it to be longer because actually it turns out it was too short, and they were enjoying the process, and the process wasn't quite completed. So having that additional time, I think that's also perhaps a good measure. We want more.
Just to quickly add as well, the reverse mentoring program that I was in lasted 4 months, and we're still engaged in that mentoring after that as well. So the willingness to continue it on, I think, says a lot about the success of it as well.
I think on a kind of similar to that, if someone's had an issue or a challenge, and a very easy factor to see how successful it's been in is actually how they've changed. Are they feeling better? Are they a brighter person? Are they more engaged with anything, whatever it was getting in the way? And I think that's obviously I love a metric as well, but I can't always measure them. But I think that in itself, and just to see me with my development hat on, I think that's where the measure for me is, someone has actually improved and developed and moved on from where they were maybe a few months back. There's never enough time for these things. I think, Wesley, as you were saying, these things take a long time, don't they? And they're potentially forever, these relationships. So, it's not a quick fix, but yeah, I think everything, all of those things, and just someone to be very different in their manner and demeanor, I guess, is a measure for me.
And I suppose as well, there are only so many metrics that we can continually measure, whereas the effects of mentoring generally they'll have an indirect effect on a huge amount of things throughout an organization that you may never be able to attribute to that mentorship program, but it has had some sort of indirect effect. So just to follow on from that, obviously everyone here has one of those key characteristics of a successful mentorship program, in that everyone here on the panel is very willing and interested in mentoring generally, or hope. But for everyone who's joined the call today, just for their benefit, how can we all be mentors to others, whether that's in a more formal structured setting or a more informal setting? And what tips would you give to the people on this call who might want to become mentors, and how to find out a bit more about mentoring generally?
So I came to mentoring when I started a new job, and I just thought to myself, okay, I've been in the professional world for quite a while, and I used to be a secondary school teacher and no longer have that hat on, but I did think to myself, I kind of miss working with younger people, and I miss working with different people. So I just put out into the universe, to use a hippie expression, that, I want to mentor this year, and the gods of Twitter sent me different programs. I signed up to them, and now I have 2 mentees that I've been connected with since 2020. So I think in terms of tips, just if you think you want to give it a go and it could be for you, then put yourself out there. I have a friend who very wisely used to mentor young girls at her secondary school. So that's also something you could do if you've still got a relationship there. And even if you don't, then approach them, ask them, is there any sort of mentoring scheme? Could I mentor young people from my community? So yeah, put yourself out there. I think also be willing for awkwardness. I mean, that if you're going down the informal route, that could happen, and you're just kind of going to have to roll with it. I know in British culture, we're very afraid of being mortified and embarrassed and awkwardness, but it's just part of life. So sometimes you're going to meet people, they're not going to be a cup of tea. They're not going to be people who you would necessarily have been friends with. But actually, there's also, some value to be gotten from that because, yeah, diversity is the spice of life. You don't need to meet everybody who's the same as you to evolve as a person. Quite the contrary, probably. So yeah, put yourself out there. Be prepared for some awkwardness. Look online. There's loads of resources. Speak to people who've been part of mentoring program, or think to yourself, what would I want out of mentoring if I needed one, or if I had a mentor, or the good interactions you've had in your life, teachers, parents, carers, whatever, and identify those qualities and try to embody them. And I'll leave it there.
That's great. Thanks very much, Samantha. That's really interesting perspective you've given us. Anybody else have any thoughts on, what someone who wants to become a mentor could do, or even if they are interested in perhaps, some sort of grassroots mentorship program at their own organization, perhaps if they don't have the resources that larger organizations may have? Tricky one. Yeah, I won't put anyone on the spot. It's difficult.
I think it's a hard one, isn't it? Because some of these things need resources behind them because even to get things off the ground, you need something, you need an admin, you need something behind it. So I guess I was just thinking back to some of the companies I worked for that didn't have the resource. And I think it's just a case of finding the right people to speak to. You probably know who those are. Getting all the reasons why it's a benefit. It's, often you have to go in with these things as a business case. It's why is it important to the business? We all know why it's amazing and brilliant, but it's why is this important to the business? What can be achieved? Can I do it, please? Yes, thank you very much. And I guess it's like you just said, Samantha, put yourself out there for all these different reasons and just say, I want to do this. Let me try. That's very easy for me to say. I've been through that and I'm in a different position now, but yeah, it does take a bit of effort. And I think for when you're starting things up, I think generally it's just don't be dissuaded if it doesn't go right the first time, learn from it, work on it, change it, try again. And I think it's just, if you have the energy to keep going, I think just do it. And I think that goes with, with setting something up for sure. And there's definitely loads of people around. You've got, I guess us lot on the panel today. I'm sure we could all help with some suggestions at some point. There's lots of different resources and help out there that, people can go to help set these things up.
So Robin, I think one takeaway then, as another example of a characteristic of a great mentor or indeed mentee would be resilience and just continuing, not to be dissuaded if things don't go right. And I suppose it also goes back to our formal versus informal discussion earlier that, a mentoring program doesn't have to, be particularly rigid, organized for it to work. It can be very informal. And as we've all discussed on the call today, it can be so much as, sending an email around a few people that might be interested in the office or messaging someone on LinkedIn. It doesn't have to be a sort of large company-wide, with loads of policies attached. It can be something quite simple and organic. So just because I'm conscious of time, just to move on to my final question to the panel. So we've talked about wanting to become a mentor and how you might go about arranging a mentorship program. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to join a mentoring program as a mentee but isn't really sure if it's for them?
Just do it. I think stick your hand up and take that leap of faith. Like if the thought has popped into your mind, I wonder what it would be like or how I might benefit if I was in a mentoring relation. Just do it. Like sign up to it. You've got nothing to lose whatsoever. You're gonna have a variety of different conversations and experience different feelings and have different thoughts as you're going through the conversations. But that's the part of growing in your career and growing in your role or whatever profession you have. Just do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if I reflect back on the mentor-mentee relationships that I had in my own career, like some of them were great and have been great. Some of them weren't, and like you're not going to hit 100% every time. So if you're just open, willing to take the chance on jumping in as a mentor or mentee, it's definitely worth a shot. You can't knock it till you try it. So.
And as Samantha says, be prepared for awkwardness, I think, is one of the key messages, just because, as you say, you're not always going to come across people who are exactly like you, but there's great value in that too. So unless anyone has any further remarks, just because of the time, Samantha, do you want to close us off?
Oh, actually, I don't know what the time is. Okay. Obviously, there's different personalities. I think most of us here on the panel seem to be quite extroverted. If you're introverted and you have mixed feelings about putting yourself out there, obviously it's difficult. But yeah, if you want to advance, you do have to come out of your shell a little bit. So I would also urge all of you, whatever your personal inclination might be, to give it a go. Luca asked a question about developing mentoring programs for LGBTQ in-house or with external support. I don't know how to answer that, so I'll probably need to see if I can pick that up with Luca somewhere else.
Brilliant, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions there in the chat that we will get back to on people. As Samantha said there, one from Luca about developing mentoring programs, which I'm sure George and the rest of the team at myGwork would also be happy to assist with. We've just had one more question through the Q&A, but I think that's just from an anonymous attendee who says, totally agree, he says, or she says, I truly think mentoring programs are necessary in today's world. And yeah, totally agree. I think that we've identified today from talking just amongst ourselves that there are so many fantastic reasons why someone might want to become involved in a mentoring program, whether as a mentor or a mentee. So looks like we're out of time. We've got 3 minutes till 5 o'clock, and I know there is another event run by myGwork coming up. So just want to thank everyone very much for their input today, and I will pass back to George.
Excellent. Thank you so much, firstly to Tom for moderating this panel, and thank you to Elliot, Samantha, Robin, Wesley and Naz for their contributions this hour. This is, having sort of sat in the background and listened to this panel, it's been a really, really fascinating insight into sort of the things that we can do in developing our mentoring programs and certainly getting the most out of it. And particularly, I hope for our audience and looking at the chat, you sort of seem to agree with me in this case that it has been really uplifting, I think, to see the ways that we can all be mentors, really, if we want to put ourselves to it. I would say, as said, all of our panelists are over on myGwork. You can find them on the event page as well if you want to connect with them after this session. We do have many other panels coming up for the rest of this year. I think as far as first panel of 2022 could go, this has been really, really wonderful start on a high note. We do have another panel coming up next week for the Lunar New Year, exploring the experiences of Asian people and the Asian LGBTQ+ community, which you can check out, as well as further panels coming up relating to sport, LGBTQ History Month, and more in the coming months. We do have, starting in just a minute, have a free workshop that you can attend on becoming a myGwork mentor, and the details for that will be down in the chat now if you want to head over to that and find out more with Katia, who will be delivering that session. Nonetheless, thank you very much to Reed Smith for sponsoring this session again. Thank you very much to our panelists and our moderators. We couldn't do it without any of you. And thank you very much to our audience for joining us this afternoon. And we hope to see you again soon. I've been George Wright from myGwork, and I will leave you all to enjoy your evenings. Goodbye.